What does a mime do? If you're walking down the sidewalk, minding your own business, out for a lovely stroll in this beautiful fall weather, and then as you're walking down the sidewalk, from out of nowhere, this striped, white-faced mime jumps out and pulls an imaginary rope out in front of your path, and you're confused for a moment. Is there really a rope there? And you stumbled, and it's kind of awkward until you realize that it's imaginary. Some people, their reaction will be confusion. Some people will be annoyed. Some people may even be angry that this mime has disrupted my path to where I need to go. But for some people, you'll pause for a moment and you'll step inside the imagined. You'll be jolted from your automatic, robotic stepping towards whatever next work task is before you, and be pulled playfully into things that cannot be seen. What does a mime do? A mime, without even using words, helps us to see things that are hidden. And we can choose to notice those hidden things that are revealed, or we can choose to be annoyed. Another disruption on our way to making more money or consuming more things or reaching some goal of success. The scripture passage we read today, I don't know if you caught the first couple lines, but they're rather sad. And those two lines that we read at the beginning of this lament they're representing 20 previous lines of just utter despair. It's a poem written in response to Israel's suffering, a unspeakable suffering. The kind of suffering that just can't be put into words. And not just the suffering of an individual, but the suffering of a nation. That the Babylonians have pushed in by their armies, and they made it to Jerusalem, and they've overthrown this capital of Judah. They've left people dead. They've carried off all of the elites, the cultural elites of the city. They've left famine and hunger in their wake. And the people of Judah are left wondering, will we even survive as a people? Are we going to disappear? Will people forget about us in the history books? It's a national trauma that is hard to put into words. And so the poet steps in. And the poet writes these words in Lamentations, a book that has 5 poems in it. Because there's places where only poetry works, where predication is impossible. But how do we imagine going on in life in the midst of some national, unspeakable tragedy? And yet, into that pain, into the unspeakable, something about God gets revealed. Something hidden is shown forth. What are the national tragedies? What are those moments of unspeakable suffering that you remember from our lifetimes together? It depends on your generation, but those moments when something horrible has happened and we don't know what to say. If you can imagine just the loss of words when JFK was shot and killed, or Martin Luther King at 9/11. And it's just a temporary loss of words, just temporary. But I'm sure you can recall it, you can feel it. What can I say in this moment? I remember an interview with David Letterman, that long-serving late-night TV host. He was asked about key moments in his time as a late-night host, and one of his memories was after 9/11, after the show had been shut down for a few weeks, as people were starting to find their voice again in response to this unspeakable suffering there in New York City where his theater is. And he recalls just the daunting task of having to stand before the nation doing his monologue to tell jokes again, to help return this nation to laughter. It's hard to find words in the face of unspeakable suffering. When we think about the national tragedies that we've experienced, we often forget that one of our unspeakable national traumas is the residential school system and a campaign for cultural genocide with our indigenous peoples. I think it doesn't come to mind because, of course, we're not the ones standing on the inside of the trauma. We're like the Babylonians who came and left a people just wondering, will we survive? If our language is taken away and our customs are taken away, will I survive? Some people think about truth and reconciliation and having a holiday like they are encountering an annoying mime who has nothing to say but is somehow pulling a rope out in front of our day-to-day living, trying to make us see something that we're not quite sure is there. Something we don't want to talk about. We don't want to find the words for it. And other people, they get that the presence of being in the presence of an indigenous person's unspeakable suffering, it is like a rope being pulled out in front of us that if we see it, we have to halt for a moment. As awkward as it may be, as much as it may make us feel like we're going to stumble, but it reveals something that we're not seeing with our own eyes. To see what can't be put into words on the faces of those who are suffering, or to catch the hints of suffering when we're the ones on the outside of it. Perhaps the greatest mime ever known, Marcel Marceau, a French entertainer. And we may not know that before he created his well-known character of Bip, he lived in France during World War II and was part of the French resistance. And in his memoirs, he describes how he used his skills as an entertainer to help keep Jewish children safe by